Here in America, work is in trouble. We've offshored our manufacturing, sent away good jobs, and lost so much ability to make things. American Giant is a company that's pushing back against this tide. They make high-quality clothing, sweatshirts, jeans, dresses, jackets, and so much more right here in the USA. Visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order when you use code STAPLE20 at checkout. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com. Promo code STAPLE20.
Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the Giant Crime Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. And don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. Again, a reminder, I have a free agency tracker that analyzes every move the Commanders have made in this free agency period. Even ones that maybe you don't know a lot about. So anyways, give that a read. You can go to the Commanders homepage on ESPN.com, and it's all there. If you wanted to find out about the Cowboys moves, the Giants, the Eagles, whomever, go there as well. So anyway, do that as a favor to me. In a minute, I'll be joined by Craig Hoffman from, of course, the Team 980 and the Take Command podcast that he does with Logan Paulson. Always enjoy having Craig on because I think it's always a very smart discussion. I think we both kind of have a similar approach to how we view football, et cetera. So I always like having Craig on to discuss these matters. So stay tuned for that. Just a couple of little things before we go forward. I will be doing I did a private Zoom for the Gold members last night. We'll be doing one for the regular members next week. So a few of you joined last time. Make sure you do this. And I'll let you know on Monday when my podcast comes out on Monday. I'll let you know what day. Most likely it'll be Wednesday or Thursday. So anyway, stay tuned for that for you regular club members. On Thursday, as I'm recording this, it's Wednesday night. Some of you may not watch this until Thursday. We finally get a chance to talk to Deebo Samuel. He'll be able to address the media for the first time since he was acquired in the trade by Washington. And of course, on Wednesday, he had his contract kind of, I guess, more or less finalized, restructured, however you want to call it. Washington did not pick up the player option bonus. So what that means is Washington will take the cap hit on this year's cap. So that full 17 point, I think it's 4.5, whatever million, that's going to go on to the 2025 cap. Had they picked up that option, then they could have spread it out over a couple of years. You're still going to be accounted for that same amount. It's just over how long of a period of time. So that's one thing that happened. But again, we get a chance to talk to him, his thoughts on the trade. We saw the Players Tribune essay that he wrote. But now we get a chance to talk to him for the first time. So, so there you go. Anyways, that's it for me. That's what's going on. I will be back again on Monday with another podcast. We have the owners' meetings coming up a week from Monday or Sunday, I guess it is. And so there'll be more stuff there, but 3 a week for now. And then we start getting ready for the draft, man. After we come back from the owners' meetings, it's going to be a lot of draft talk about what they should do, not only at 29, but at second round, fourth round, just continuing to build out this roster, et cetera. So anyway, join me for all that stuff. But now, here's my conversation with the Team 980's Craig Hoffman. All right, Craig. Well, first of all, always good to see you and have you on. But let's start with the Commanders. I know you and Logan have talked a lot about free agency and what they've done on Take Command podcast, a little plug. And it's a very good one too. So anyway.
By the way, John, I did wear my Take Command shirt for the show. So,
that's fantastic.
Extra plug for my own show. Shameless.
And no, I think that's great. And it's funny because, I think the problem with naming a podcast or having a podcast with your name in it, it would feel awkward having any sort of level of merchandise. Like, who's going to walk around with my name on it? I don't know.
I think there's plenty of people, but it'd be more awkward for you. So I think the solution is we need to get you a Take Command shirt. So I will get you a Take Command shirt.
Okay. Listen, I'm just waiting for a rollback to come through for me. So, but that is like, what do I just put JKR? It's like, nah, it's like nobody wants that. So anyways, let's talk about approach to free agency. What has stood out to you about Washington's approach to free agency? And again, we're recording this like it's more than a week old now. So what stood out to you about their approach?
Yeah, I think they've been measured and they've been smart and they realize that there's real limits to free agency. I think that's kind of one of my big takeaways from this year NFL wide that certainly Washington has applied this is there's just not that many good players in free agency.
Right.
And there's multiple reasons why, but I think the biggest one is the cap has gone up $20 million multiple years in a row. So anyone that's a good player, the incumbent team is like, yeah, we can keep that guy. Like there's teams that didn't plan on. Alaric Jackson was going to be a free agent for the Rams, their left tackle. Then all of a sudden the cap jumped, a couple $1 million more than they expected. And they're like, oh, wait, we can afford that guy. Cool. Let's go sign him. And so you have Ronnie Stanley, Alaric Jackson, all these players, of the top 10 going into free agency, like 8 of them signed before
Right.
free agency actually opened. And so if you're Washington and you're a team that has a ton of cap space, do you then just go spend on the next guys and say, screw it, whatever? No, you have a price. You understand the value. You get creative. Laramie Tunsil move is incredibly creative. Say, we need a left tackle, so let's go get one. And they can afford to take on the big salaries. And, are they going to get $18 million of production out of Deebo Samuel? Probably not. But if they get 15 million, like that's still pretty good. It's probably more than they would have gotten from De'Ami Brown. I like De'Ami, but is he a 10, $11 million player? Okay, what's that extra $4 million of production worth? And so I think the measured nature, the creative nature, the understanding of the marketplace really stood out. And I realize that's unsatisfying because ultimately, like, did they move the needle enough to catch the Eagles? No, the Eagles are still in a class of their own, possibly in the entire league. But I do think they got better at a rate that was significantly more than other teams because they understood the marketplace in a smart way.
And I'm glad you brought that up too, because it's like, as you said, when the first option isn't there, there have been times in the past, and the first I wrote down on my pad William Jackson, because when they couldn't keep Darby, they immediately spun to Jackson, and it was a bad fit. But they felt like they had to go get that next best guy on the list, and and I've always said, like, it took me one phone call to someone who know him to say not a good fit, and yet that's where they went. So, like, that's the kind of contract situation you avoid. At the time, it's like, oh, William Jackson, you got this other corner, and then it was like, oh, he doesn't fit. So I think those are the kind of mistakes that you hope to avoid by taking this sort of approach.
Right. And they maintain flexibility too, right? Outside of the
Right.
Kinlaw deal, there's basically no, I guess Ballore was a 2-year deal, and
Yes.
there's one or two. I guess technically Harris was a 2-year deal when that was all said and done, I think, when I was looking at the contract details yesterday. So outside of those guys, and Harris is like 8 million over 2 years. So
You're
basically
right.
no
It's a
money.
very cheap contract.
Yeah. And Ballores, I'm sure, is very cheap too. He's a special teams guy. And so outside of Kinlaw, there's no long-term commitments. And so their ability to, if they can trade back in the draft, accumulate some of their draft capital, get back up, maybe make another trade in the future. Like the trade market, one, I think there's an inefficiency in it. There's always going to be some level of risk because if a player had no risk, why would an incumbent team trade him? So we understand that that's part of it. But who are better players? Guys like Deebo, guys like Marshawn Lattimore, in theory, guys like Laramie Tunsil versus the guys that were available in free agency. I would say the trade market is better. And so if you can get the balance right of importing young cheap talent on it through the draft, understanding that your stars are probably going to come through the draft, and some of those might come from unexpected places. Adam certainly knows that with guys like Kittle and Warner, et cetera, in his past. If you can get that balance right, there is probably a market inefficiency to exploit in the trade market. And I think because Washington signed all these 1-year deals, they can take on a big contract, even if it's not signing that player to a free agent deal in a way that's smart for the future. So, are they walking a higher tightrope doing some of these trades because they have less lottery tickets and ultimately the draft is a lottery? Yes, I think you'd have to be denying reality to not be able to admit that. And I think if you look at Adams' draft history, like obviously the hits are incredible, but there's also a lot of misses in that 49ers situation as well, which is, by the way, why the 49ers are tearing it all down and rebuilding. They've hit a bit of a dry spell. But I like what he did year one here. I'm excited to see what he continued to do. And if he hits 4 out of the 5 draft picks that he has, who cares if he hits 4 out of 5 or 4 out of 7? Like, you got to hit the 4. And so ultimately, the other big takeaway for me is their best plan is to be good at your job, John. If you're good at drafting or sign the right guys in free agency, that is more important than some master strategy. Because if there was a master strategy, every team would use it.
And I do think, like, to your point, they did not tie themselves to bad contracts. And like Kinlaw, like, we'll see with him because and I kept saying I'm withholding some. I'm curious how they're going to use him. I want to see that to see how might this look and how might it work out for him? Because I'm not saying it's good or bad. I just want to see. And because I think the plan for him is different than how he's been used. But even let's say he doesn't work out, it's really
Mhm.
1 year, that second year where it's $18 million cap hit, something like that. But you can get out of it after that. So it's not a prohibitive deal. And so I think they've done a good job where if you can't get certain guys like DeMarcus Lawrence, it's my understanding is it would have been a 1 year deal, which I think is a-okay for a guy of his age and coming off an injury. So, you know what I mean? So like I think they don't tie themselves to bad contracts. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I just pulled Kinlaw's deal up. He's got zero guaranteed salary in the third year of the
Right.
deal. So if they would take on $9
It's a
million
2 year
of
deal.
dead cap money, but you post June won it, like you can do some things to mess with that number. But you save 7 million if you cut him in the final year. So if he's not worth it, you just cut him. And
Right.
like, that's the harsh reality of the NFL. I don't mean to besmirch Javon
Right.
Kinlaw. I just cut him. Whatever, guy. Sorry for you.
And he
But
might
like,
he might end up coming
but
through for them in a big way. We don't know yet.
he might, and that's the thing is like you hear. I think the other thing that about their approach, John, that's you asked that question initially is when you flip on the tape of these guys and you listen to them when you guys are having the press conferences, the virtual Zooms, whatever you want to call them, like you understand why they signed every single guy that they
Right.
signed. There's an intelligence, there's an intensity, there is that guy's a commander to all of it. On tape, these are guys that hustle. They don't take plays off. They're on the backside of a run. Javon Kinlaw, is he a great run player? No. Will he bust his butt to get to the
Yep.
sideline as a
Yep.
backside three technique, even though he has no chance of making the play? Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, he will.
Yep.
And so Will Harris, the versatility, the physicality, the hustle, the intensity at which he plays. And then you listen to him and Jonathan Jones talk. There's a leadership, there's a maturity to them. So they're taking bets on the right traits, understanding that all of this is a risk. There is no guarantee anywhere, but there's certain traits that you want to bet on. And I think they're betting on the right traits. And I guess my other thing that I ask people when they criticize Washington, and again, I'm not trying to blanket defense every move that Adam Peters is making here, but I don't necessarily see any other options. If you want to tell me that you wanted to spend big on one of these corners, I can get behind that. Corner is a very, very volatile position. So taking a big risk on a corner is always, a hit or miss proposition, as we saw with Lattimore, and hopefully that hits this year with a full offseason versus what it was last year. But outside of that, and maybe missing on Josh Sweat, if you want to call that a big miss, where he clearly wanted to, I think, go back and play with Jonathan Gannon, who's his former D coordinator. I don't know what other moves that I would have been like, I'd be like, oh my God, you really missed there. You had to make that move, and they didn't. So I think that's the other thing. You're also at the mercy of the market, where what options were really available to you.
Did you think Sweat was a miss, Josh? Would you have?
I would have paid I'll put it this way. I would have paid what Arizona paid him. I would have paid the just under 20 million a year for a guy that I think plays really hard, plays the right way, plays the run decently well, has some real pass rush juice,
Mm-hmm.
and is is he a high end one? No. Is he a one? I think he could be. So is that a miss? I mean, he's got to want to come here.
Right.
So I don't know. You have certainly more insight than I do.
I don't know what their thoughts were on him. I know that they were in on some other guys. I don't know about him. And, it would make sense that they would at least call because they're familiar with him, having played against him, and also because he is solid in both areas. So I think that, what they were certainly trying to get some other guys instead.
Yeah.
Right. Or instead.
I mean, we know they wanted Mac, right? Like Mac makes a ton of sense to me. I would have paid
Lawrence,
the 1 year, 18 million
Me too.
for Khalil Mack, but it's a two-way street. Yeah, it's hard to be like, how dare you, Adam Peters, not sign Josh Sweat to the contract he signed somewhere else with the head coach that he loved, that he played for a couple of years ago. Like, it's hard to compete with that.
It is. And I think, and like we know Ronnie Stanley would have been a guy that they would have at least made an offer to. Whether or not he would have come here, we don't know, but he would have made an offer. And then, like, if you could get Ronnie Stanley not having to trade for Tunsil and keeping the draft picks, well, that's a really good fill for them. But it's a good recovery to go get a left tackle. And you're right, like teams trade guys for a reason, right? And, we can look at it and say, like, Tunsil's a big upgrade here and can do well for 5-6 years. And there could be as simple as like they just don't want to pay him as he gets older because they have so many young guys to pay right now. And it's kind of like when you are hitting on all those draft picks, you have to be cognizant of that. So you may lose some guys, like these guys could lose guys down the road for the same reason, you
For
know?
sure.
So, but but yeah, and with Sweat, like he was an interesting one to me because, I think I laid out the four options at end before free agency, and he would have been my fourth one. I like the idea of pairing Mac with a young guy from the draft
Yeah.
because you can have a guy, because that way you can get that guy and then you can draft a guy because pass rushers take. I was just looking at this today because I get asked this, just like you, like, would you rather, go all in and Trey Hendrickson, even though I think he'll probably end up resigning with Cincinnati, or would you rather draft somebody? And if you want to hold the draft picks, I'm good with that because I'm fine with that completely. But then you look at the draft picks the last few years in that range of 29, and there's not an instant impact. That's
Yeah.
why. So that leads to my other thing which is like along the D line. I like what they've done because I don't think you have to have this rookie come in and be this savior at that spot. They just have to come in and contribute that first year. So I think it softens the immediate need for an immediate impact of like, oh, we need a 10 sack guy, right? Because chances are they're not going to do that. But you know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah, no,
like,
100%. 100%. I think that they have I actually think they've raised their floor defensively slightly, at least up front,
mhm,
right? Like Dietrich Wise is a better player than Cleveland Farrell.
correct.
Dietrich Wise is a good football player.
I agree.
Watching him a little bit more and, talking to Logan a little bit about him, like he's a bona fide starter, not like an impact 10 sack guy. He was a 5 sack guy, I think, last year.
Mhm.
And he's going to get, he's going to hustle and get dirty work type of sacks where the offensive lineman doesn't realize the quarterback has escaped the pocket, kind of
Correct.
gives up on the play, like that
Definitely
kind of
did
stuff.
that.
But he's also like a big body who plays the run well.
Mhm.
And that's what Cleveland Farrell was supposed to be. They also re-signed Cleveland Farrell. So if the role that Farrell was in becomes Dietrich Wise and the backup to Cleveland Farrell becomes Cleveland Farrell,
Right.
you're better as a football team. There's also a chance that
Mhm.
Cleveland doesn't even make the roster.
Correct.
Like if they have Armstrong, Javante John Baptiste, Wise, and a rookie, and then maybe more of a pass rush like a Jacob Martin winds up making the team, right? I don't know that Farrell makes the roster, and that's fine. Like if that guy was a starter for you last year and might not make the roster this year, that means you've upgraded your floor. Now they still need to figure out ceiling, and that's where like does Landon Jackson, I think the kid's name is from Arkansas,
Right.
who
Mhm.
Logan loves.
Yeah.
Kid's an animal, plays his face off. Like, does that guy wind up being your pick at 29, or can you trade back and get him at 35 or whatever? And that guy develops with his ridiculous traits. He tested like a freak show at the combine. Does he wind up becoming a bona fide 10 sack a year guy and you're set? Like, great. If not, how are you going to find that guy long term? And that to me is the harder question, right?
Yeah.
And this is the challenge that Peters and Newmark and this front office has in the long term is because you were so good so quickly. And if you are going to continue to be so good, and the cap is going to continue to rise at this level because Netflix money is coming in, raising the overall pie. When are you going to get your studs? And you're going to have to wind up hitting in the draft. There just is no other way unless you're going to continue to make trades like this. But again, trades are risky because why would the incumbent team trade a player if he was perfect? And so it just becomes this circle of like, okay, we got the quarterback. Now we want to make sure we get a couple other guys. Where like Houston was able to be bad for a couple of years. They get Stingley. They have, they make the move to get Anderson in the same draft. They get Stroud. And now all of a sudden they've got 3 blue chip guys in 2 years. Where does Washington get the guys around Daniels? And that's not impossible. And certainly other teams have done it. And, the Chiefs and the Bills and the Ravens, like they've continued to be the best teams in football with the best quarterbacks in football. These are champagne problems, but it does create a bit of an interesting situation versus can you get one more year in the lottery, if you will, to borrow the NBA terminology, to get one more guy to go with your stud quarterback. Like that is to me the challenge long term, because I don't think that these market problems that we've been talking about for 15 minutes here are going away for the Commanders anytime soon, nor do I think they're going to be bad and thus picking somewhere much higher in the draft.
And I think to your point about the D line, what I really liked it to me is that it has increased their ability to have more options of what you want to do, not just what you want to do, but maybe do it better. I don't
Yeah.
know, you can use 3-man lines with an Eddie Goldman up there, right? You can go to your heavy set front with you 3 defensive tackles and a D end, because now maybe you have better players in those spots. Now, I mean, it's not like Jonathan Allen was a bad player. I mean, I know fans like to rip on him, but it was still a quality start NFL tackle. But I think overall it's better, right? And
Yeah.
for the floor, like you said, now is there a high ceiling player? No, but maybe maybe you can get more production from more areas versus Dante Fowler had 10 and a half sacks.
Right. You have options. And so, if a certain front seems to really give a team problems, if you have the ability to, I mean, this was Belichick's whole theory of defense, right? Belichick for 20 years in the NFL, really longer than that, because he did this kind of stuff with the Browns back in the day, even like his defenses could do everything. And I don't know that that's exactly what DQ and Joe Witt want to do, but it seems like they're pushing in that direction where if we need to be a 3-4 team one week, we can be a 3-4 team. If we need to be a 4-3 team, we need to be an odd team, we need to be an even team, we need to be an under team, we need to be an over team. Like all these different fronts, all these different coverages. We expect you to know all of them. We expect you to do all of them well. And we're going to make the offense play to their weakness. And we're going to take away their strength. And like there's times that, he would in coverage say, I'm going to stick my number 1 corner on your number 2 receiver to shut him down, and I'm going to double your number 1 receiver the entire game. So it's literally going to be you can pick your number 1 guy versus 2 guys or a bad matchup on the other side. And like that's risky, but Belichick was able to do it. He had the right personnel. He had the right people. He had the smart football players. By the way, one of his favorites was Jonathan Jones in the last decade, who now is here in Washington. Not probably the guy he was 5 years ago, but still very good, very smart. And so I think that like that's an interesting way to go about it is if we can't do it with talent, can we make up some deficiencies with scheme? And then the other part that we know that DQ is great at that we saw last year is can we make up for it with situational excellence? And that's going to be the true measure of like, can this team do some of the stuff it did last year is can you be maybe not the best team in 25 years on 4th down offensively, but could you be still one of the top 5 teams in the league? Can you be really good, let's say defensively, 1st and 2nd down can be a bit of a wash, but which I think they'll be better on 1st and 2nd down this year, by the way, because of guys like Wise. But on 3rd down, can we be awesome? Like, can we just understand what we need to do on 3rd down, week in, week out, lock it down? Our pressure packages are on point. Our coverages are on point. Can we generate turnovers? That's always been kind of the DQ way. So there's like situational stuff that can elevate you as a football team. And if you get the right guys, I think that stuff comes along at a higher rate, even if down in, down out, you might be playing with fire from a talent level a little bit more than you want to.
And I think that's the desire for Dan Quinn. I think one way he's evolved as a coach is being more open to different ways of doing things and the adaptability and versatility like we've seen in the NBA. And this wrote a whole big thing that was based off some of that, which was, positionless football, but also not just so much like, can this guy play this position, but more just how do you use guys in different ways than maybe they've been used before. And I think that's when you're looking at some of these guys at 29, I think you're going to look at guys who have a level of versatility as well, can rush inside, can rush outside. Dietrich Wise can go inside in pass rush situations. Kinlaw, he could play outside on, in their rundowns or whatever, on 1st, 2nd down and go inside because he's got a quick step, right? And inside. So could you look at a guy like and I know like this is going to become a popular guy. Others have talked about it, but the kid from UCLA is a defensive end, is someone who played the linebacker and has been an edge rusher. And I know like Ken Norton has experience with them and, he's going to be visiting here probably at some, for the top 30 stuff. Right. So I think like guys like that who have that level of versatility and that explosive first step are going to be attractive to them. And again, I just think when you have the ability to use more packages, then maybe can you get them into better spots to then impact the passer, which is what Quinn wants.
Yeah, we did a podcast, like we did a mailbag podcast on, it was like March 18th. So whenever this comes out, it was on March 18th. And that's not a relative date. That's an actual date on the calendar. You can scroll back in your podcast feed and listen to, as opposed to being like, it was Wednesday or last Tuesday or whatever it was. But we did that mailbag episode. And one of the questions we got was about RAS, relative athletic score. And last year, the Commanders picked like Sainer still, I think, had like the lowest score, which basically is because he's small and relative athletic score takes height, weight, wingspan into account. And he obviously does not score very well on those. But he tested off the charts in a bunch of other areas. And so he still was like an 8 point something out of 10. And I think that's another thing too, is like, what's the profile of a commander? It's big, it's rangy, it's athletic, it's versatile. And we saw that. I don't know if you and I had this discussion on the sidelines. I had it with a couple of people last year during training camp. Is you just kind of look around the field and you're like, that's an Adam guy, that's a Ron guy. That's an Adam guy, that's a Ron guy. Because the Adam guys, you're like, oh, that's a football player. Like, that's a big dude.
Jordan McGee.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah.
These guys are huge for their position. So outside of Mikey, who's beastly in a different way, like they pick these big, strong, physical dudes. And so the question was basically like, can we imitate their board by just looking at positions and being like, oh, okay, that guy's a 7, he's off the board. 6'6", he's off the board. That guy's not. Like, I don't know that it's that simple, but I do think when you talk about the versatility, like if you have great athletes, you can do some things with them. And then it becomes up to Adam, the scouts, et cetera, to know the person, the competitor, and the football IQ to say, can we turn those athletic traits into something more? Which I do feel like is a bit of a slippery slope. Like there are times that I get frustrated with like commenters or callers or whatever on the show, on the radio or on YouTube to be like, and they're like, can you just change this guy's position? I'm like, it's the NFL. It's hard. You can't just change guys' positions, but can you tweak their roles within their position? I think that's a more nuanced way to put it. That's actually more accurate to what can happen of, all right, this guy's a corner or this guy's been playing some nickel. Can we move him outside like Sanders still? There's traits that we see that this is going to be possible because of his intelligence, because of his quickness, because of his anticipation skills, all that kind of stuff. Can we take a guy that's played a certain safety role and maybe, hey, he's a really good tackler, but he's played mostly in the post. Can we put him in the box? Right. Can we use this guy? He's really explosive as a linebacker, off-ball linebacker. He's not necessarily showing up in coverage. Can we blitz him a little bit more? And like those are the things where I think Quinn, and I was actually just listening to your show from earlier or from last week about some of the stuff with receivers, right? They found a way with Diami last year, OZ last year, all these guys that had career years. Can we find the route tree that works for them? And I think that's the other thing with this team and this roster and kind of who they're bringing in into what you're talking about and what you've written about, where can you find the role that works for the player? Can you maximize what you get? And then the last part of that too is the culture. Sorry, I feel like this is long-winded, but like just quickly, like the reason you bring back Bobby Wagner is he was a second team All-Pro player last year. That's good. 2, he's a force multiplier. He makes everyone on the defense better every single snap. If defense is assignment and alignment, he knows everyone's assignment and where they're supposed to line up. He makes every single player better. And so, not to mention, he makes everyone in the building better because of how he goes to work. Think back to DQ at the Combine talking about somewhere Bobby Wagner's right now getting better. Like that dude makes the janitor a better janitor. Like that's how good of a force multiplier Bobby Wagner is. And so I think those are what you're betting on. But all of those are to make up for the fact that there is still a talent deficiency. And I think that is the hard part. Like especially when I hear like national analysts being like, I don't know about Washington. And there's a huge part of me that's like, yeah, but you guys don't get it. You don't get the intangible stuff. You're too much into the numbers or the what you see on film or whatever, and you don't get the full picture. But also, they're not exactly wrong either, and that's where I have a hard time with kind of where this team is at in terms of a prediction. Luckily, I don't get paid for predictions.
Well, and to your point, that's going into last year. I remember thinking, and listen, it was hard even when you're up around them to always know, because I kept thinking last year, I'm like, this team is unbelievably tight. Their intangibles are off the charts. It's too bad they're not in a better point with their roster. And I remember telling a coach that after they beat the Lions, I'm like, back then it's like, but because there were so many unknowns, well, now they're knowns. Like we know how good Jane Daniels is. We know how good certain players are and can be with him and just around him. So like, those are the things that it's like, it's hard to measure that aspect, to your point. And I also think like bringing in guys like, Dietrich Wise was a captain in New England. Jonathan Jones is a strong leader. Like
what does Jones do for Lattimore? Like, I'm curious your thoughts on that. Like, what is Jonathan Jones? Like, Mikey Sanders still is the future captain of this team. We know that, right? But he's younger than Marshawn Lattimore. He hasn't been around as long. Jonathan Jones is older and has been around longer than Marshawn Lattimore. What does that do for him in that room as they try that reclamation project?
Well, and I think that's a good question. And off the top of my head, first of all, you have a guy coming who's won Super Bowls.
Yeah.
So, and he's not just won them, he has played a key role on those teams. Like that automatically gives you some street cred. Like Bobby Wagner came in. It was amazing last year when you're talking to players and they were like, you're interviewing him and they're talking about Bobby Wagner and he walks by and it's like, oh my God, that's Bobby Wagner. Like their reaction was like that, but because he could still play, there's an impact on what he said. Now with Lattimore, the one thing I'll say is like, we haven't gotten to know him enough to know how he'd be receptive to certain things. But I'm going to guess, like just watching him, like look at the talk, watching him work with the coaches last year, that if Jonathan Jones has something to say to him, that there'd be a discussion about not so much a, hey, you should try this. It could lead to, I think Jones, just my understanding with him is that he'd be the smart enough to guys like, hey, Marshawn, why are you doing it this way? And that leads to a discussion, which can then elevate both of each other, because like Jeremy Reeves and Nick Bellore, high level special teams players, their discussions are different than they would be with someone else because they both have done it at a high level. I think for Jones, now, has he been as good as Lattimore had been? No. But if Lattimore, like if there's an issue, Lattimore now has a veteran he can go talk to about it. Because you want to hear that. Like it's one thing to hear from your coaches. Another, like Sam Russell's not going to go up to him and say, hey, why don't you do this? Like it's just not his place yet. But Jones can do that. And so I think like that definitely is going to help. I think it's a really good point.
Well, and I also am curious from less of a technique standpoint and more of just like can you keep your head in the game?
Right.
Like we saw him lose it
Yeah.
twice in the playoffs.
Yeah,
like he got into it with Evans, he got into it with Brown. And it's like, hey man, we need you to be a number one corner, which requires your head to be in the game. And is Jones a guy as a teammate that can step to him and be like, yo, snap out of it. Like settle down.
And I think
it's going to be okay.
And I think going through, like when you're new to a situation, he missed so much time with them. You know, he's rehabbing while they're on the field. Now you get to know guys, but you have to go through things with guys. So if you have like, you know what I mean? Like you've got to go through the spring workouts together. You've got to go through camp together to go through some of those ups and downs and those moments to build that kind of relationship. Like it's one thing, like he just gets here and you're going through it. Well, how many of these guys really know him that well to know how to get him to right himself, right? So I think like having them go through the off season together and all what it entails, and then start to go through it in games, you get to the playoffs, you would hope that in that same situation, he's going, Jones can say like, snap out of it. And then he, we don't know if that can happen, but I think he has the cred to do that. But it's also going to be like if he had just gotten here at the same time, if they're going through, like, are you going to listen as closely because you don't know him as well? Now you're going to have a guy that you can know a lot better because of all that.
For sure. And that's what I'm really curious about. And by the way, I think the inverse is true with Tunsil. Tunsil, part of the criticism in Houston is he's not a leader.
Right.
I don't care if he's not a leader here. He's like, you look at Coleman's got like, even though he's a second year guy, like Coleman's got a bit of leadership and a little bit of nasty streak to him. I like it's, future captain type of stuff, 7 years down the line. Wiley's got Super Bowl rings. Allegretti's got Super Bowl rings. Cosme, we know, is emerged as a young leader when he gets back healthy and has a big old nasty streak. And Biotish is like the guy on that offensive line. And so I don't need a nasty streak or, I had a buddy of mine who works down in Houston on the show. And he was just like, if Jaden Daniels gets hit late on the sideline, Tunsil might not be the guy to run over and knock the guy out. Well, that's fine because 5 other guys are already going to be there on this team. I need Laramie Tunsil. Laramie Tunsil. I mean, 5 other offensive linemen on this team that are gonna beat him over there to do it. Sam Cosme is going to be over there swinging a crutch for the first 6 weeks of the season. And so, like, I don't need that. What I need is premier left tackle play. I didn't get that last year. And Laramie Tunsil can just be Laramie Tunsil. And I thought it was great that he was on the Zoom with you guys, was like, I'll mentor the young guys. I'll do whatever. That's a great attitude to have coming in. But we know that's not necessarily been his skill set. I mean, awesome if it developed.
Right.
But if he's someone who's more adaptable to the environment he's in versus if he's a thermometer, not a thermostat, right? He measures the temperature. He doesn't set it. That's who Laramie Tunsil is.
That's a good analogy. I kind of like
that. Not an original, but if he's that, he's coming into a place where the temperature is right.
Well, I also, to your point, I think what's important is they have leaders in each room, and they have that in that line offensive line room. I think in the D line room now, I think you have more of that with
Yes.
Wise, and I definitely think it's bigger with him in there. So in addition to Armstrong, I think is good like that too. So I think you're
And
good
by the
there.
way, there might be, I know this is uncomfortable to say, but I think Allen leaving is addition by subtraction in that way. I think John was seen as a leader. I never got the sense in talking to folks around that D
I
line room and around that building that he was actually that good at. Like, he was a good rah rah speech guy, which is funny because I don't think he considered himself a vocal leader, but like, he was pretty good in the huddle, getting guys fired up, ready to go. But like, the
that
way
was
he
his
was in
style.
meetings and all that kind of stuff, I don't know that that was his strength. And but because he was such a big personality and because he was the incumbent guy who's been here and had the C on his chest, that's going to drown out other voices.
Sure.
Now guys like Armstrong can step up and be like, I'm the guy who's been here, and if that's really who he is, that can shine a little bit more.
For sure, and I think that's where Wise makes a big impact as well. So,
Yes.
yeah, absolutely. So, last thing then, and it's funny with offensively. I was asked this the other day, and I did one of those private gold Zoom sessions, and we were talking about would you rather have like basically boil it down add a receiver in the draft if you could, or a running back. And and like my thing is I want a playmaker. So I
Yeah.
don't I don't necessarily care where they're at. And I remember talking to Logan about this, like you can't count on converting as well on fourth down as you have in the past. Therefore, you need guys who can make big plays more for you. So would you have a preference if it came down, like let's say it comes to the second pick or even the first pick, like there's two guys there, one's a receiver, one's a running back. Does it matter to you where they go?
So we're talking about like if one of the receivers, then like Omarion Hampton probably is the
It
guy that we're
has to, yeah,
considering
the
late,
top
right?
end, yeah, and
Ooh,
yeah,
that's tough.
yeah,
I'd probably go. Well, in that case, I'd probably go receiver because I feel like I can get a really good running back in like the third round. So like I'm gonna
right,
Logan up this question and be like, I don't know that you're gonna have to choose. Like I hate when he does that to me, so I'm gonna do it to you instead.
okay,
But it's like I don't know that you have to choose because of the depth at later rounds in this draft. Like you can find good football
sure,
players. If I'm having one or the other at this point with their roster to not Logan up the question, I would say receiver. I think they need another young body in that room. Running backs are more easily findable in whether it's next year in the draft, next year in free agency. You can find someone who's decent at that position. It is the nature of the position. And they have a decent stable right now, even if I would like to see them upgrade the room.
right. Yeah, and that's how like I would like to see an upgrade. I'd like to see a dynamic back come in, give that. And everybody wants the Jameer Gibbs type, but there are several guys in this draft who fit that role. But man, you got a quarterback who can throw downfield. If you can get another guy who can run downfield, now you're shortening those drives and making your life a lot easier. So, but again, give me a dynamic playmaker.
For sure.
Doesn't matter.
Agreed.
So, anyways, Craig, I appreciate coming on. I kept you longer, but it's always a great discussion with you. That's why I enjoy it. So I know people enjoy it because they tell me. So thanks a lot. Anything you want to plug quickly besides?
Radio shows daily at 4 o'clock on the Team 980. You can also watch that live on YouTube or listen on the Odyssey app. Take Command is the podcast with Logan. Just search Take Command wherever you listen to your podcast, and it'll show up right in front of your face.
Thanks, Craig.
Thanks, John. Always a pleasure, sir.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Craig for joining me, and thank you, as always, for tuning in. I'll be back on Monday with another episode, so I'll talk to you next time.
These days, work is in trouble. We've outsourced most of our manufacturing to other countries. And with that, we sent away good jobs and our capability to make things. American Giant is a clothing company that's pushing back against this tide. They make all kinds of high-quality clothing and activewear, like sweatshirts, jeans, dresses, jackets, and so much more, right here in the USA. So when you buy American Giant, you create jobs in towns and cities across the country. And jobs bring pride, purpose. They stitch people together. If all that sounds good to you, visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order when you use code STAPLE20 at checkout. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com with promo code STAPLE20.